I hope everyone can hear me. Welcome to this third virtual roundtable that today will meet around the mitigating the effects of COVID-19 on micro, small, and medium enterprises, and how can we build back better. My name is Virginia Rose Losada. I am the Sustainable Enterprise Specialist at the ILO Office for the Caribbean. It is my pleasure to host you today. Before we go any further, let me please give the floor to the Deputy Director of the ILO Office for the Caribbean to give some opening remarks. Lars, thank you.
Thank you very much, Virginia, and welcome to everyone. I see that we have close to 100 participants already, which is very good and shows us that us organizing these roundtables, these virtual roundtables, has a purpose and is useful and seen as useful among our partners in the region. To me, it falls to welcome you all on behalf of the director of the ILO's Decent Work Team and Country Office for the Caribbean, Mrs. Claudia Conyars, who unfortunately could not be present today. It still is a pleasure to welcome you to this virtual roundtable on micro, small, and medium enterprise sector in the Caribbean in the context of the COVID-19 crisis. As Virginia mentioned initially, this is the third of the technical roundtables that we're organizing for the ILO constituents and other partners since the world changed, as you might say, so very dramatically for all of us approximately 2 months ago. Since then, we have seen what started as an epidemic in Asia become a global pandemic, which has now infected over 4 million people and killed approximately 300,000. And staggering and tragic as those figures are, we know that these are just the officially confirmed numbers and that the real numbers and the reality of it is significantly higher than this. And accompanying the tragedy of the pandemic and the necessary measures to protect lives, health services, and slow down the outbreak, we have seen unprecedented consequences for economies, for businesses, and for employment. So the task of returning to normal, or what is often referred to, although I don't really like the term, the new normal, I don't like it because I don't feel there is much normal about it. This new normal is going to take a lot of time and effort, and the goal should of course be to build back better than what we had before, take advantage of this crisis that's affecting us all. There is a saying that do not waste a good crisis. I don't see what is very good about this crisis, but let's try to take advantage of what we're learning from it. The ILO is continuing its work to support its constituents and deliver on its mandate throughout this crisis, and is gearing up to provide assistance where it can in this monumental task that lies ahead of all of us. And part of this is this series of virtual roundtables, which we kicked off already, I think it was the 26th of March, with a dialogue among Caribbean employers, followed with another one among the workers' organizations in the region, as well as a number of governmental, high-level, and, as this is an example, technical and sectoral roundtables. This is a process that we aim to continue in the months to come, and they're all aiming at the same, to explore jointly the challenges that the region are facing in various areas, to provide a platform for practitioners across the region to share experiences, and for us as the ILO to learn what the key stakeholders across the region are seeing as the main issues, the main needs, and thereby help determine how the ILO can best and most effectively provide its support. Today's virtual roundtable covers the MSME sector, of fundamental importance for the economies and employment in the Caribbean, and one of the hardest hit by the socioeconomic consequences of the pandemic. I will end here and thank you all for taking time to participate to discuss this very important topic. And with this, I will wish us all good luck and hand back to Virginia. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lars. So let me start off by just some rules for this session. You will have noted that the mic option has been disabled. This is to avoid disruptions, but you will see on the right-hand side, there is the chat option, and we truly invite you to make use of that chat box to ask your questions. Also, please note that for any reason the roundtable were to suddenly close, please use the link that you already used to access the Zoom platform, and we will reconnect. So thank you very much, Lars, for your words. And as we've been saying, efforts to contain the spread of COVID-19 are absolutely essential to protect the lives and avoid the collapse of our health systems. But these measures are also proving to have great impacts on enterprises, on workers, on employment, and this is mostly due to disruption in production, drastic drops in demands for goods and services, etc. In the Caribbean, the strong containment measures that governments have put in place since about end of March have helped to flatten the curve, and we are seeing that they have been up to now relatively effective on that front. And as of May 11th, according to the Caribbean Public Health Authority, over 1,600 cases have been reported. However, of course, the effects of this sudden and drastic halt in economic activity, especially in sectors such as tourism, in which we will be hearing a little bit more, has been very sudden and sharp. And the fall of commodity prices in oil, for example, have added to that hardship. So the growth in the region for some organizations is being estimated at contracting of 6% roughly in 2020, which would mean that the Caribbean is set to head towards a severe recession. And many say that it will be much worse than the one experienced during the financial crisis. Micro, small, and medium enterprises are particularly vulnerable since they tend to hold fewer assets, have more limited cash reserves, as well as lower levels of productivity. On May 7th, the Caribbean Center for Excellence for Sustainable Livelihoods, in collaboration with us, the ILO, hosted actually an interesting session with entrepreneurs and small business owners from Grenada, Guyana, Antigua and Barbuda, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And during that session, we wanted to hear what were their challenges, what were they doing, did they see in the future. And in terms of their challenges, it is not of surprise that many of the issues that were raised were, for example, that they had to stop activities either because the government had not found them to be essential services, or because of disruption in their suppliers. They also mentioned, for example, the difficulty of them transitioning into an online world because of the lack of knowledge from clients and suppliers, and even a trust issue around that use of platforms. There is also, in link to that, the idea that there was inadequate financial tools, and especially linked to e-commerce, not the necessary platforms to be doing that. Governments worldwide are still putting in place economic stimulus packages, though in the Caribbean, given the limited fiscal space, these policy options will need to be more restricted, and expansionary policies will be less likely. Several Caribbean governments have, since I'd say end of March, started announcing packages to support and give relief in the short term to SMEs. Like, for example, they've been seeking ways of delaying payments or accelerating payments of VAT from governments, providing waivers for taxes, providing access to loans or grants to different sectors, the agriculture, for example, sector, or to different target groups. And so we see, for example, stimulus packages in St. Kitts and Nevis, in Turks and Caicos, in Jamaica, in Trinidad and Tobago, in Bahamas, that we will be hearing a little bit later on, or Barbados. If you want to know more about the kind of stimulus packages, but not only for enterprises, but also in terms of protecting workers, of what are employer organizations doing or worker organizations doing, I invite you to visit the ILO's webpage on COVID and the world of work, where we have a database where we collect and we show the different measures that governments are being put in place. Yet, as we move forward in the next phases of exit and recovery, several of our countries have now started unveiling, five-phase strategies to get out. It is really time to start thinking and planning on programs and policies that go beyond the short-term relief. So what is it that our small, medium enterprises of different sizes in the new or in the transformed or in the old sectors will be needing in this new realm? What will they be needing in terms of financial, but also non-financial support? How will enterprises themselves plan, prepare, and strategize for what the future holds? It's not only for the future, but also even as we approach quickly the next hurricane season. What support do they need from governments or from other organizations, such as employer organizations? These are just some of the few questions that we've launched to our speakers today that I'm very pleased to have with me here. So what will happen is that we will actually have all speakers speak one after the other for 10 minutes. Some will use PowerPoints, others will not. And then after that, we will open it to questions. As I said before, please use a chat box. This is really your opportunity. The second half of this session, it's really you who will craft it with your questions. Given the amount of questions that we receive, we may be clustering them. So if you don't hear specifically your question, it might be within a group of questions. We will be sharing all of the questions with participants, because the one thing that we definitely want coming out of this session is that each and one of us takes one thought, one seed, one idea with us as we leave today, and that we can think about today, tomorrow, even next month, in terms of what is it that we can really do to support SMEs in this new era. So without further ado, let me introduce to Mr. Iso Mohammed, who I invite to already start unmuting his microphone. Mr. Mohammed is the General Manager of Kelvin Ghani Enterprises here in Trinidad and Tobago. Iso, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me? Hello? Am I being heard? Good, excellent. Pleasant day to all our viewers. I represent a very successful 58-year-old business involved in the importation and distribution of a wide range of hardware and a select range of food and beverage items. And we operate from the village of Twin City in Trinidad. Just to put things in a little perspective, although our company was regarded as an essential activity, from the time of the announcement that we were going to close our doors, our business revenues plummeted by about 75% as of this morning. So although we were essential and regarded as essential, we've already taken a huge hit. And of course, you could imagine what has that done to profitability. In the coming days, the coming weeks, the coming months, and for some even the next couple of years, the best of our business expertise will be put to a severe challenge in order for us to get back to some normal level of profitability, and at the same time, hold on to our traditional level of employment. To return and sustain success, it is essential that all key players, such as the banks, the government agencies, international agencies, the legal fraternity, insurance companies, shipping lines, as many supporters and stakeholders as you can think, unions, even the industrial court, we all need to be on the same page, sharing the same vision that we must successfully re-energize the business and private sector if we are going to have long-term sustainability. I will just focus on some of our experiences and some of our views. In the next few days, there will be no doubt of many businesses restarting or trying to restart their operations. And we have to be ready, ensuring that all the prerequisites are in place so that when we open our doors for business, we are safe and we can provide an adequate service. Reorganizing, remobilizing expensive equipment and machinery that has been idle for several weeks is a task in itself. We want to ensure, therefore, that there are trial runs, that we take cognizance of plumbing issues, electrical issues, electronics issues, even sewer issues. We want to ensure that pre-COVID safety measures are intact and post-COVID safety measures are also intact. do not be surprised if even you do have a good startup, that within 2 or 3 days, you may find yourself observing machinery breakdown, because that's the nature of machinery that has been sleeping for a while. Startup is going to have some expenses involved in it, and assistance, short-term, medium-term, will be required. We may need to come up with some kind of a criteria of who will get what, how much, how it will be paid, whether it be from regional, international, local grants or loans. Certainly, we will need help to get back our businesses in operation. In Trinidad and Tobago, we've been fortunate that our banks have provided us with deferrals on our loans. This is a very temporary measure, but not so much of a positive measure, as what we really need is freezing our loan. We require these loans and these loan payments and these interests to be frozen. And somewhere down the road, perhaps 6 months as a minimum, we can look at rescheduling, renegotiating, refinancing these loans. But for the time being, we want to be able to use whatever cash flow the operations will generate to funnel into getting back our business to some level of normalcy. In Trinidad, and Tobago, we may have a unique situation where with the availability of scarce US currency, one of the things that has to be done is some arrangement between banks, between governments to better facilitate the distribution of this scarce resource, whereby we can see the smaller entities being able to access US to pay for their bills. We may want to relook at our priority as it relates to luxury items compared to basic and near basic items. This is going to be a huge assistance if smaller guys can access US. In the next few weeks, we're hearing from the weather experts that we're going to be into a heavy hurricane season. Flooding therefore is going to come. Local produce is probably going to quickly dry up, and therefore our demand on currency for food is going to be even further increasing. As businesses reorganize their day-to-day activities, it's important for us to go back to some basics. Who is our target market? What are our competitive advantages? What are our strengths? Focus on your bread and butter lines. And while you're doing all of this, it's important for us to convert fixed expenses into variable expenses. As we relate to staffing, we will want to ensure that all staff are given the opportunity to restart as businesses restart. And some ideas to do that is to consider rosters. For example, if you're a customer working an 8 to 5 shift, everyone working an 8 to 5 shift, you may, as an alternative, run 2 shifts, 7 to 12, 12 to 5. One of the advantages of that, a couple of advantages of that, is everybody gets, or more people gets to be employed, perhaps at a reduced salary in the short term. Transport is going to be already difficult, so that they too will have longer hours of work. And in particular, common rooms such as washrooms and lunchrooms will be better outfitted, will be better be able to equip for reduced staffing. Certainly working from 7 to 12, you may not need a full hour for lunch, but you may just need 15 minutes in a lunchroom. Look at widening your customer base and your supplier base. Another alternative for rostering is perhaps one crew on a Monday and a different crew on a Tuesday. The trick here is to come up with solutions that will get most, if not all, of our staff back on the job line. Another activity that will work well and has worked to some extent for us is redeployment of staff. Staff who may be multi-skilled may have all of a sudden now to do things that they haven't done in the past, or they can do, but they haven't done it in recent times, but they may now be called upon to do that. That will bring us another issue of opportunity for cross-training and training. A new buzzword that is all over the place is work from home. I'm not sure how that will work for all companies, but let's guard as for family-run businesses the sensitive information that we want to expose in people's home, and ensure that you don't overexpose or expose yourself to breaches in confidentiality, where you can work from home based on emails and so on. I think that that's an excellent idea. One of the key is to keep the communication lines open. WhatsApp technology is readily available. Everybody has a phone. In the Kelvin Ghani scenario, we have a WhatsApp group amongst managers, and then we have smaller groups among departments, so that Tuesday, for example, if we are going to open, we know we are going to open on Wednesday, we send the word out to the staff that we require for Wednesday, and so on and so forth. Keep the lines open, who's going to work, who's not going to work. As we reopen, we want to ensure that our facilities are reorganized. For example, I touched a little bit about on lunchrooms. We have a tendency to have exploited warehouses and accounting departments and boardrooms. And sometimes we may tend to treat with washrooms and lunchrooms, you know, as afterthought. We want to ensure that we take the opportunity to reorganize and change our infrastructure to accommodate more staff in the lunchrooms, bigger staff rooms, more equipped staff rooms and lunchrooms. Spend some time on ensuring sanitizing and cleaning agents are readily available and placed throughout the organization. And companies must be very rigid to ensure that there's compliance, not just for normal safety requirements, but for COVID type compliance, the use of face masks. A handful of people will give trouble. We have to ensure that there are disciplinary measures in place to ensure that there is compliance if we cannot get the commitment. One option is to ensure that nearby health centers, health facilities, that there is a strong relationship, strengthen that relationship, so that if there are sickness, people falling sick on the job, that they can easily send there. If these centers are going to be overwhelmed, another opportunity might be to register a small panel of medical practitioners, so that you have that option to send your staff at these places and get some level of priorities. And finally, the idea of health plans, group medical health plans is a good idea once it can be afforded in the short to medium term. Some specific help from government and other agencies, well, the opening speaker touched on it a little bit. Tax breaks are going to be essential. Soft loans are going to be essential. Freezing loans are going to be essential. Some form of a memorandum of agreement, for example, between lending institutions and governments, where soft loans can be given with a protracted repayment arrangements. There is going to be additional costs for reopening, restarting new products for sanitization and so on, soft loans for those kind of things, as well as including the subsidies perhaps for products, sanitization products and health plans. This is where I will leave it for the time being until our open session. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mohammed. A very tangible and real portrait that you laid out there. May I now ask Ms. Davinia Grant to give us her reflections. Mrs. Grant, as she is unmuting her microphone, is the Executive Director of Access Accelerator, the Small Business Development Center of the Bahamas. Ms. Grant, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Virginia, for having us participate. We're always excited to do things with the region. Great insights from Trinidad thus far. Thank you, Kelvin, for your comments. Let me just share my screen. So just to make sure we're all aware of the organization that I represent, it's the Access Accelerator, which is a quasi-government agency under the Ministry of Finance, founded by the Ministry of Finance, the University of the Bahamas, and our local chamber. Our mission is to increase the ability for MSMEs to provide employment, which is important to the ILO, obviously, diversify wealth, and drive development of a robust and resilient economy. This concept of resilience, which is central to the conversation today, became very important to us, or has been very important to us, but in particular since Hurricane Dorian, which we are still recovering from, And now in the wake, or not necessarily the wake yet, but in the midst of COVID, it's still a very important concept. So many agencies, as companies are looking to restructure to be resilient, agencies are looking to see how we can support, and SBDC Access Accelerator is doing the same. To facilitate this conversation, I think it's important for us to first define the way we quantify or qualify an MSME in the Bahamas at the moment. For this particular program that we're offering to help companies with business continuity, obviously, well, in our situation, you have to be a formally registered company. I understand there's some other countries that are offering support, I believe in Jamaica, where they have some considerations for the informal economy. But for our program, it has to be 100% registered. Your annual revenues need to be less than 3 million and less than 50 employees. So this is how we're defining an MSME in this instance. Going through the program, it was important for us to respond very quickly, and I want to take a minute to just applaud my team. They heard the need quickly and the appetite from the government to support in a very significant way of $20 million. But as you mentioned, just as companies had to pivot the way they do business from face-to-face to online, we also had to do the same. So in a matter of 3 to 4 days, the team was able to pull together an online platform to facilitate millions of dollars of applications from MSMEs, and not just the application, but the financial institution network that's processing the applications and administering them on our behalf, and wiring payments rather than any other traditional means that we would have done in the past. And with a lot of our disbursements in our normal program, it would have been check-based, which we're happy to move away from that. There's some of the solutions that were created during COVID that we will not let fall away to the wayside after COVID passes. We're very happy that not just agencies, but companies have finally moved into an environment where we're doing way more electronically, without a lot of the paper, without a lot of the unnecessary face-to-face time. That was a major expense in the traditional program, and I'm going to come to that as we discuss training later on in this 10-minute presentation. Also, the government came in with an additional $5 million of grants to support the MSMEs, but specifically as a payroll assistance, which 50% of the request from our MSMEs for payroll would be given as a grant opposed to a loan, which was really good because at the end of the day, these loans are 5-year terms at 5%. And so if we could reduce the burden post-COVID of the portion that's directly related to payroll, it would be more advantageous to those MSMEs. But the whole point of the program, though, was really to support encouraging MSMEs to maintain at least 51% of their staff complement during this period of time, which for many is not necessarily easy, obviously, given, I think another presenter mentioned already some of the traits of MSMEs in the region, and one of them would have been, tight cash flow reserves and those types of things. So it's not an easy assumption that one can keep on the employees. And I want to take a minute here to say that prior to COVID, of all of the companies registered here in the Bahamas that reported their revenues, MSMEs, as defined earlier, represented 17% of all the revenue, but 50% of all of the employees. And so for us, coming up with solutions, not just to save or assist with the continuity of these MSMEs, but also the staff complement that they support was significant because collectively they employ half of the country, which is critical for us. The program, we believe, has been extremely effective. We've had quite a number of applications, a total request of almost 50 million, approvals of about 22 million at the moment. It is likely that the amount available in this program will increase in the coming days and weeks, given if the situation continues to be protracted, then we would have to make adjustments. But 307 companies thus far have been able to benefit from that 22 million. They represent about 2,200 employees, which we're really happy to be able to support those employees. At some point, we're going to talk about the support for full-time employees versus part-time employees, but I just wanted to make it clear here that that support is to both full-time and part-time, especially for those companies that are part of the essential services and they are able to work either through traditional means or through curbside services or deliveries. In that instance, if volumes allow, some of the part-time persons are still being held during this period of time. It was interesting that of the requests, which was really for working capital, we looked at salary, rent, supplies if necessary, insurances. Of all of the working capital items that we would have allowed them to access the funding for, 46% of it was specifically for salaries. Given some of the comments about the region also, it was not a surprise that the majority of the largest amount of the requests was in the tourism sector, our services sector, as well as retail trade. I want to mention the self-employed sector as well. This program does not include the self-employed, so really is you have to have had 2 full-time employees, up to 50 employees. But the government also came up with a way to support, a package to support self-employed MSMEs, and to date up to 2.6 million has been dispersed to them, to over 5,000 self-employed Bahamians. So we're very happy about the government's response thus far. Any number of programs, I've only mentioned the 2 that directly relate to MSMEs. But you could imagine that this is the beginning and we're still trying to see our way clear in terms of what support is going to be necessary. Now I'd like to move to the portion where we discuss what's next. In particular, how do we build better? And there's some concerns that have allowed us to try to come up with some solutions. And just quickly on the labor side, one of the concerns that is still being discussed, whether by the government or the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce or some of the other organizations, this concept of, it's expensive to keep staff as an MSME, but it's also expensive to let staff go as an MSME. And so you have the furlough process where those employees are able to access national benefits during this period of time. But when we look at what's expected of the recovery, there's no expectation that economies will recover back to the original level immediately. There will be a slow climb to that. It's definitely based on tourism and some other aspects of our economy. That said, even when the economy reopens and companies are rebuilding, when you've discontinued the furlough process, this concept of taking staff back on is still a concern, because you still have the expenses of operating and you have potentially lower revenues. And the cost of letting a team member go is also prohibitive for an MSME, because you have to pay, according to law, you have to pay severance packages based on how many years they've been with you and the like. So this discussion is a very difficult and robust discussion right now in the Bahamas, because you obviously want to obey and abide by the laws, but at the same time, there's a very real expense to that dilemma. And I just want to put it out there in case in the discussion there are some creative things that are happening in other countries in the region that can assist. The other part would be for part-time employees, as I mentioned. I think it was about 20 or 30% of the persons who are going to benefit from this program, 20% of their team members are part-time, and they would not have had national insurance contributions for those part-time team members. Therefore, if they are laid off or even furloughed during this period of time, their eligibility is not the same as those that were full-time. So it's again a niche area where MSMEs tend to employ part-time staff to allow them to scale with seasons or to scale with as their businesses grow. But at the same time, it creates an employment difficulty in times like this. We have to figure out what sort of interventions we can, as an agency, what type of interventions can be created for these part-time staff members. We don't have any at the moment. So again, I'm opening that up. If there are any suggestions, anything creative that's happening in other jurisdictions that we can learn from today, I would love to hear some discussion with regard to that. The last thing in terms of labor challenges, this particular one may not really affect the micro and small businesses, but some of the medium-sized businesses, for some reason or another, would have had to employ expats, non-Bahamians in their organizations, and they pay national insurance contributions. And what we found arise from our members at the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce is that there is a challenge, because while those contributions are made, it's not as easy for them to access benefits at the moment. So these are some of the dilemmas or difficult spots that this particular crisis has shown a bright light on, that we need to create solutions going forward. Now, as we talk about building better, it was very interesting to see from the applications, and this is consistent with our regular access accelerator program, that many of the companies, while they are formal, their compliance to regulations was not up to date. So for example, they may have been late with their registration renewals, late with the contributions for national insurance, late with incorporation filings, those types of things, and they're prerequisites for accessing assistance. So for us, we're launching a campaign to specifically help and bring an awareness to MSMEs of how important it is to be compliant, because one, it allows you to access emergency assistance if a crisis arises, but also it allows the government to be able to have the proper amount of data to create policies and interventions to help when the need arises. So that's one thing in terms of building better. We need to do a better job of helping companies be compliant and to be formal. But we've also seen, as we look at the numbers coming out of the applications from MSMEs for assistance, that there's still widespread need for training and business development. And as a result, we've opened up, we have an online training and business development suite that we're about to launch on May 18th that really was for our traditional clients. But given the emergency and now what we're seeing coming out of a whole group of companies trying to survive during this period of time, we're going to open up that training to all of the clients who would have accessed funding under this program, so that now that things may not be as robust as they regularly are for them, they can take that moment to step back, access some new tools, and re-strategize the way they're going to recover their businesses using some online assistance. So we're very happy to be in place as a support system for that, for these companies. The last thing I want to mention before we end, which I don't have here on the slide, but a focus on startups. I don't know about the other countries in the region, but in the Bahamas, when we started to move away from just strictly essential services, and now there's some allowance for curbside commerce versus as well as deliveries, it was really advantageous that some of the MSMEs quickly pivoted away from what they were doing traditionally to fill the gap. So rental car companies that would not have the same amount of customers as they had before, they started doing the deliveries. Quick pivot, same assets, same people, new purpose. App developers started to develop new things to facilitate online orders and deliveries and that sort of thing. A huge focus now is there for e-commerce versus, via companies that offer cashless services. So we're seeing a surgence of these types of MSMEs pivoting their traditional business to be able to meet the need. And this is why we continuously say that if, an investment in MSME is the best investment for making a stable, sustainable, resilient economy, because MSMEs tend to be able to pivot a lot faster and a lot smarter, especially in times of crisis. So we want to support that pivot. If there are a number of people that are laid off, we want them to be able to access funding for startups. And we're going to be releasing some of that programming very soon for quick, important, pivotal, resilient startup ideas that will help immediately in this context and during the recovery. And we feel as though that's going to be important to facilitate the economy, as well as it will assist with new employment. Even if the startups, employ 1, 2, 3 persons as micro businesses, it's better than what we're looking down the barrel right now. So that's what's happening in the Bahamas. That's the contribution that the SPDC is currently making, thanks to our relationship with the government and thanks to our relationship with our partners and financial institutions.
Thank you so much, Davinia. While I had said I would leave all questions to the end, there's one very specific question that I think would, which is around the demographics of the affected part-time staff. Do you have any additional information on that? And while you think about that, I invite Dr. Carey to start preparing for unmuting her microphone.
I don't have it at my fingertips, but I do have it. If there's a way to share information, post this webinar with participants, we can send that information. But we can segregate the part-time team members by industry and other demographics.
Thank you so much. And also just to note that in your presentation, you also covered one of the other questions that has come in, which was what are the recommendations for village shops and startup businesses in the OECS who may be unable to open after lockdown? And you mentioned the pivot. You mentioned also you as the agency are trying to see how you can provide financial support, but also training to kind of help those in that reinventing, let's say, or readapting what they've been doing in a new way. So thank you very much, Davinia. And now we move from kind of the general services to the MSMEs, and we wanted to focus in more on the tourism sector, given the very important, what's such an important sector for the Caribbean. So it is my pleasure to now give the floor to Dr. Carey Hall, who is the Director of Tourism Development in the Ministry of Tourism of Barbados.
Good day. Thank you very much. Good day to everyone who's listening. I'd like to commend my fellow colleagues on fantastic presentations. As you know, I'm representing the tourism industry. I'm not curating down as to the granular level with respect to small businesses, but more a helicopter policy view with respect to how we are creating the types of policy directives and alternative forms of tourism where we could better integrate our MSMEs, particularly coming out of this COVID crisis. As you well know, the tourism industry has been the hardest hit of all sectors globally. And the unfortunate thing about that is the Caribbean happens to be the most tourism dependent group of nations in the world. Therefore, this virus has had a catastrophic and unprecedented impact on the region, particularly on MSMEs, because they make up quite a large component of the tourism sector. So the likes of this virus, the likes of which has not been witnessed in 100 years from a global perspective. With respect to assistance, and my colleague in Bahamas, it actually highlighted a lot of things that we are also doing in Barbados. We also have a stimulus package. the government has put out an economic stabilization program to buffer the islands, and we're talking about all categories, maybe businesses, particularly small businesses, employees, self-employed persons, the vulnerable, and of course, special attention has been paid to the tourism sector, because even though it's the sector that is our major foreign exchange earner, and it has been completely wiped out because the whole world has come to a complete standstill simultaneously, we do understand that though a fickle industry, it is also one of the most resilient, and that we are dependent on tourism, as the world is dependent on tourism to a large extent to bring us out of this economic abyss upon which we have fallen, even though we also have our eye on the need for further economic diversification in the region. But the eye on this is one of the loan facilities for the government. This demonstrates the way the government is thinking and the direction is going in. It is actually stated that for working capital, the loan facility is for working capital and good development outcomes in the following areas. And they clearly stated they want job retention, they want better linkages with the local agricultural sector, they want businesses to have better use of or increased use of renewable energy, and also the upskilling of local staff. So the government is working out the finer points and the finer details of this stabilization program, and then it will be able to be assessed by all the relevant categories of individuals that are obviously suffering and struggling and in great need of this type of relief package. Now, in terms of the non-financial assistance, and I speak specifically within the tourism sector, about a month ago, a tourism task force was formed in Barbados, because I know a lot of recovery task forces have been formed in many countries or many destinations around the world. And the task force was really formed to oversee the recovery and the transformation of the tourism industry. Now, a large part of the mandate of this task force will be, we want to stem the bleeding, and we want to ensure that we are able to buffer the shock of the local businesses from this, and also to protect our employees and our most vulnerable. We want to make sure health and safety protocols are done across the industry, and that we retool and reskill our people. But it's the transformation part that we really have our eye on. And a large part of the task force will be not only dealing with the recovery, but also for the reimagining of the Barbados tourism industry in a way that will create new jobs, businesses, and entrepreneurial opportunities for the Barbadian people, and to assist MSMEs in particular to adapt to the rapid changes currently taking place in the global marketplace. And they are, especially due to this pandemic, because we do believe that the tourism industry will come out a lot different than it went in, just like what happened in the 2008 great financial crisis. So we want to assist them to adapt to these rapid changes, and also to reintroduce them back into a thriving year-round tourism ecosystem once this crisis passes. Now, we're looking at a more inclusive industry, which will be developed for the purpose of stimulating entrepreneurial opportunities, whereby locally owned businesses are assisted, directed, and empowered to plan and execute the development of new product within the tourism industry. The type of product that is cutting edge, that is what the research is telling us the modern day traveler is looking for. And we already knew that from before this crisis, but of course, post-crisis, a lot will have to be accelerated once the industry recovers. So the new product in the form of events, festivals, cottage industries, tours, attractions, experiences, etc. And all of this is in line with the creation or the overall plan and vision of developing a more sustainable and responsible tourism industry, where institutional frameworks will be established to develop sustainable niche products like the health and wellness tourism, which what we're doing is we have already of alternative forms of tourism, but what we're doing now is putting greater structure around them. Health and wellness, we expect that to be the first niche to recover. It was actually the fastest growing niche before COVID, growing twice as fast as the global tourism industry. And we believe, based on the nature of what this pandemic is, that it will resume its #1 position. Health and wellness, eco, volunteerism, agro-tourism, culinary, community, cultural heritage, etc. These types of alternative forms of tourism, other than or in addition to Sand, Sea and Sun, which it will not necessarily compete with, but will complement, and also utilize local goods and services from other sectors, and most importantly, involve small businesses and communities to provide the types of memorable and unique experiences that the modern day traveler is looking for. Of course, this is to ensure that a wider cross-section of businesses, entrepreneurs, and communities are able to benefit from the prosperity that tourism brings, more so in a way that is properly happening right now. Another area that we have to deal with is assisting MSMEs in implementing health and safety protocols, which is very, very important if our borders are going to reopen. Now, trends indicate that the two areas that are expected to be at the forefront of the global tourism industry for the next 18 months to 2 years is health and safety and sustainability. And I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Now, that's the direction the destination is going in. Therefore, MSMEs have to also become more sustainable and to focus on the whole health and safety component. Before local businesses or borders can safely reopen to residents and regional or international visitors, strict health and safety protocols must be implemented across the entire island. And everybody needs to be brought on board so they understand and they're able to play their role in helping to get our nation reopened and back into the back operating into the international community. Now, MSMEs must and will be assisted in this process. To achieve this will require a lot of collaboration, a lot more communication channels have to be open, information sharing, and then the execution of the training of the health and safety protocols. There's a health and safety subcommittee on the tourism task force that is developing these protocols in conjunction with our regional counterparts, because we want to have a single set of protocols for the entire region, which will be more beneficial to us as a tourism space. And also, besides that, the Ministry of Small Business, Entrepreneurship and Commerce has also recently instituted an occupational health and safety certification that was specifically developed for the MSME sector. So this will contribute greatly to these businesses being and instill confidence in their customers that they're re-entering a safe and sanitized environment. Another area that we're looking at or we're providing assistance in is human resources development. Now, we're using this downtime to ensure that we're skilling, reskilling, and upskilling all direct and indirect tourism employees to ensure that a higher quality of service and business performance is delivered when the industry bounces back. Now, we also have a human resource development subcommittee, and there's several subcommittees on the tourism task force working assiduously in their specific area to make sure we get the recommendations up to the minister and then up to cabinet in order for it to be formalized and activated. The HRD subcommittee is working in conjunction with the National Tourism Initiative to roll out this program. Of course, we'll be doing it through online webinars because with social distancing, we can't do classroom settings, but we will have psychosocial training will be rolled off first because we'll be dealing with people who are still experiencing a high level of anxiety and stress. And before we could tell them, go and do training for service excellence or go and do training for the front office or reservations, we have to get their head back in the game by taking care of their needs first. But also train the trainer, all types of leadership training, business development training, all of that will be available. And also cutting edge training in terms of internet marketing and how to be able to best market your businesses on the internet, which seems to be an area that is not very well done in the MSME, and different things, greening their businesses, etc. So we don't just want to be doing training for the here and now to prepare people for when the reopening comes, but a strong institutionalized training culture even beyond. So we know that constant learning and upskilling and retooling is done to make sure that we are able to give the best quality of service to both our local residents and also our visitors. Transitional skills training. That is also in the works for being planned. This is aimed at reskilling displaced workers to adapt into new sectors and industries, especially in the area of health and safety training. We don't know what's going to happen. This is the thing about this COVID, the uncertainty. All the jobs may not return to tourism, and therefore, like right now, the majority of unemployment, people filling in unemployment to get their unemployment, The majority of them are from the hospitality sector, and the majority are female, under 35 years, low wage paying jobs. These individuals live paycheck to paycheck. We have to find ways to retransition them into other forms of different sectors to ensure that they could feed their families. Hospitality workers to be wellness skilled workers that accommodate the growth and development of the health and wellness sector, and also provide the type of services that may be required, as we now have to be cleaning and sanitizing and taking temperature checks, etc. for the foreseeable future. Maybe we could have some people transition out, do that in the interim until the industry bounces back. We also, from a sustainability perspective, as the island continues to strengthen its agritourism linkages, alternate forms of employment may also be in the agricultural sector, also in green jobs, strengthening the community tourism aspect from a sustainability perspective, training for these communities in basic skills, tour guide certification, e-marketing, health and wellness, to equip them with the tools and skills they need to be empowered to take ownership of their own destinies. Now, this is an area, the next area, embracing the digital technology. I think my counterpart in Bahamas touched on this. And while technology has taken over the world, particularly at this time, we find that many MSMEs have been slow to either adopt or embrace it, or they just don't have the expertise. There are a myriad of reasons why this happens. But in this new post-COVID cashless that we will be dealing with for the foreseeable future, as maybe like Lar said, it is a new normal, even though there's nothing normal about what's going on, and I don't ever want to become accustomed to this as being the normal. But the intent is to make our MSMEs more pandemic resilient by leveraging the digital resources and opportunities that are available to them. And we're calling this innovation by necessity. While COVID cannot impact you in the digital world, it is restricted to the physical realm. So that's why making the transition to digital is so important, particularly at this time for our MSMEs in the following areas. Of course, we know embracing the e-commerce platform for digital payments and bookings, it reduces the human-to-human contact, better integration of technology from the development of websites to better utilization of tools for customer engagement like social media platforms, the capacity to deliver products online, as well as to market, digital marketing or e-marketing. We also get to the stage where we have to develop e-services where companies or individuals can export their services virtually. There's something now where artists can actually now send digitized paintings online, where even though there's a war raging at our gates with respect to this COVID, we just can't lie down and play dead. We have to find ways to still find the ways to earn a living and to earn revenue. And this is the only way we're going to do it, by using technology. The last one I have here, and there are many.
Sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
You have 1 minute.
Okay, great. That's what I need. Cashless transactions, that's what we've been doing before COVID. We'll be doing it even more now. There's M-Money, Bitcoin, there's crypto money, there's MasterCard Bank in a Box, which is really interesting because when you bank in a box, you find out that entrepreneurs, micro businesses, even members of the informal tourism sector are able to utilize credit card facilities in a way that's unprecedented. And they're now able to be a part of the financial ecosystem where they're able to make more money, make more revenues, make more profits. Because before, if somebody comes, most of our visitors have credit cards, they lose a sale. So this is something that we've been looking into just before the COVID hit, and we will definitely restart the process after it's coming back in order to assist our people. Last but not least, develop a crisis resilient business. I believe that was spoken to before as well. In a post-COVID world, considerable focus needs to be placed on the need to receive the relevant training and instruction in crisis resilience, risk management, and business continuity in order to help our businesses to withstand any future exogenous shocks to this magnitude. Now, we need to teach them how to be more crisis resilient and prepared for when, not if, because this is not the last time we're going to face a pandemic like this. In the whole of the 20th century, there were 3 major pandemics. So far, for the first 20 years of the 21st century, we've had at least 5. So this is definitely new normal. So we want to prepare them for when, not if, the next disaster strikes. And this will be critical moving forward because this is an area that is seriously lacking. So I was going to do a little round off, but I will leave that for later, and I will stop right here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hall. We received a few questions, but I will leave them for at the end. I wish to now give the floor to Mr. Vic van Vuren, who is the Enterprises Department Director of the International Labour Organization. He is based in Geneva, and from my understanding, although it looks like he is officially in the office, he is now speaking to us from his home. Vic, the floor is yours.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm speaking from a little village called Azon, just outside of Geneva. So hi, and thank you for your time. I'm going to try and make my presentation practical in terms of what we've learned across the globe, from China into Europe, and now finding what's happening in the developing economies. It's almost like we've gone into a detox mode. You know, we've all been confined to barracks, and it's a time to look at a moral and a regeneration, and looking at when we do get back to some kind of normality, and we've heard different versions of it, that we start building back on the environmental and the gender components. And I want you to pop that in your mind as we go through the different phases that I'm going to talk about. When we started predicting from the ILO as to what's going to happen, we spoke about 25 million jobs that would be lost. We're now looking at over 195 million jobs, and then we're going to go into some figures as I go through my slides. As you can see from this slide, from May 2020, we see that the infections exceeded 3.5, and Lars has mentioned we're now already over 4 million, and the death toll 300,000. So this figure is revised daily. Next slide, please. When we look at the countries that are being affected, 210 countries and territories, physical distancing is the only way to break the chain of transmission, and therefore all the countries are going into full or partial lockdowns that affect more than 5 billion people. The numbers are astronomical, and they're growing day by day. Lockdowns have a severe impact on workers, as we've heard from all the presenters. Currently, 81% of employers and 66% of own account workers live and work in countries affected by recommended or required workplace closures, with severe impacts on incomes and jobs. Next slide. If we look at the serious disruptions, around 436 million enterprises in hardest hit sectors worldwide are currently facing high risks of serious disruption. And you've got these numbers in your own environment, which we've heard about. Own account workers and small enterprises account for more than 70% of global employment in retail and trade, and nearly 60% in the accommodation and food services sector, a reflection of the severe vulnerability of these sectors in the present economic crisis. So when you're talking of the Caribbean, we're having the same discussions right across the globe. It's not specific to your area. More than half of these enterprises, some 232 million, are in wholesale and retail trade, currently one of the most impacted sectors globally. Own account workers represent 45% of employment in this segment. Next slide, please. When we go into the discussion, we need to include in the informal sector. And here we're talking of 1.6 billion informal economy workers that are being hit by this lockdown. If we can go into the next sector, next slide, please. When we start looking at how to deal with the situation, there's 3 phases that we're talking about. The first one is a crisis phase. What do we do? Sorry, if you can go back one slide, please. The first phase is a crisis phase. The second phase is reactivation, and the third phase is recovery. However, what we have found is that the countries that are positioning themselves and the regions positioning themselves for the next phase is going to be speed, speed, and speed. In the Swiss country, the Swiss government where I live, if you are a small business, it's a 1-page form that you fill in, and 24 hours later, you have money in the bank as part of a rescue package. It's not pages of documents. And when we went into the developing economies, we found that it's a 4 or 5-page document that has to be completed. It then has to go through a vetting process that takes ages. And by the time the money gets into the bank in the form of a rescue package, it's already too late. Many workers have been laid off. So what we found is the trick to this equation is the speed to market, the speed to decision making. If we can go to the next slide, and I'm going to touch on now a few areas that have been important for small businesses in the crisis phase. The one is for governments to provide accurate and reliable information of the statistics of what's happening and what packages are available. Secondly, the enterprises, the small business and the companies that are being affected need to tell their clients and their consumers that they're in lockdown and when they expect to be operational again. Those are the people that are the companies that have been able, that have to lock down. There are those companies that are able to operate during the crisis mode because they're providing an essential service. The quickest payment methods must be implemented and outstanding payments must be expedited. We cannot allow for small businesses to have monies owed to them that still continue to be owed to them. That needs to be expedited immediately because it provides them with some cash inflow that allows them to keep going in this difficult crisis period. Governments are going to have to provide substantial resources, and we've seen some examples by some of the previous presenters. But if we can go on to the next slide, we talk about some of the key areas that are crucial for survival. First of all, we can transform production of goods and services to the protection and support, health and protection services areas. This is where you can realign some of your production to the making of masks, the provision of food for healthcare workers working in hospitals. There's many areas where you can focus some of the current operations of businesses to look at something else. We can assist in supporting small and medium enterprises by allowing them to access public procurement and distribution networks that were not traditionally available to them. The most important component, we can assist in covering fixed costs. What does this mean? Cash transfers, waive or suspend the collection of payments. Something that is creative in some countries is allowing for owner-operators to claim UIF, unemployment insurance funds. This is a very innovative way of allowing them to claim benefits that they weren't traditionally allowed to claim. Payment rescheduling, lines of credit that can be made available, the giving of grants and subsidies. We now look at new markets, and we can look at, we can see some of the other areas, easing of access to credit and financial services, rolling out a demand policy, maximizing the use of near markets. And I want to stop on this point for a moment. We need to give companies access to IT tools and platforms which they weren't traditionally using. This means that we have to up our game in web-based training on digital markets and service delivery. Digital payments are the order of the day, and everything is now becoming digital, digital, digital. We're going to have to provide training and provide access to finance to allow SMMEs to get the acquisition of these materials, the equipment that they require to enter into this new game. Many of them don't have this at their fingertips. And so what is going to have to happen is governments are going to provide training and access to these digitized products that allows them to get into the new games. If you look at tourism as an example, what is to stop the Caribbean from entering a very creative market of 3D tourism? When I look at my wife and my daughter who are here, what are they doing during their time of trying to find some interaction? They're going into online dance classes, yoga classes, and many of you would have experienced that in your own right. Something that you need to access in order to allow you to still be active in some kind of activity. What is to stop 3D tourism? What is to stop the jerk chicken online sites where people who look to the Caribbean as a way of tourism to do online cooking courses, crab and kalaloo? I'm going on from my home onto online cooking courses in other countries where I'm paying a small fee to enable someone to teach me how to cook a new meal. Online tourism and 3D tourism has got to take the gap that isn't being enabled by people getting on a plane and flying to the Caribbean. What can also be a very important way to look at things is if you can capture or sustain the virus from spreading and finding out a way of showing that the Caribbean is clear of the virus, you can start targeting countries like Germany and Austria who have been able to contain the virus in their countries. And there can be a direct marketing package from the Caribbean to countries where they've contained the virus, because you can't allow just any tourist to enter the Caribbean for the fear of now starting the virus all again. But you have to start a forward-thinking process of being more agile and responsive to the business environment within the Caribbean and within the countries that have come to grips with the managing of the virus. And if you go and look at the daily figures, you'll soon find out who those countries are. Now's the time to start doing deals with them. There has to be cooperation between larger and smaller enterprises, more so than before. This is now going into the recovery phase of the pandemic, and upgrading infrastructure, training and development, business support services, social dialogue, and effective coordination. But we're not right in the recovery phase yet. We've got to focus on the crisis management and on the reactivation of businesses phase. When I come back to the point that I raised before, it's all about speed, speed, and speed. And we've got to start looking at how we can get these packages to the small businesses, because the more that can survive during the crisis mode, the more we'll be able to reactivate them and get people into employment in the next phase. I sound like a preacher. I'm going to stop there for now, and I'll take some questions if necessary as we go along. But concluding remark is, globally, there is no magic wand. And what we've got to do is prepare people how to go back to work, under what conditions, and how we can get those businesses to keep going during these difficult times. And it's going to be strong leadership that is going to be required in order to take everybody, including the small business environment, through this phase into a rebuilding phase. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vic. That was a very good way of bringing together many of the things that we've been hearing during the presentations. We've been receiving several questions. For participants, please don't hesitate to post your questions in the chat box so that we can address them here with the panelists. Let me start off with a very specific question, but I can also help you, Dr. Hall. This is around what you were discussing about the training. You mentioned that there would be training for those in need. And so there was a question on how is the training going to be implemented? Will it be internet-based? If so, how do you handle the assessment and awarding of certification? What is the situation in Barbados as for the impact on the informal economy? How to deal with a lack of coverage or access to government grants? So as you can see, that's a pretty big question in two parts. One, it's around what is Barbados, where is the situation right now in terms of supporting kind of the economic stimulus packages to especially the micro or the unemployed with training. And then we would have a broader question that I could actually ask all panelists in terms of the informal economy.
Yes, with respect to the training of, go over again, it was asking if it was online?
Yeah.
Yes, that's true, but obviously it has to be online initially, because in terms of social distancing, we cannot have training in a classroom. So it will be online initially, and actually a lot of this is in the process of being done, because it's coming out of the tourism task force, and the first set of training is supposed to be on the 18th. And as they said, this first set of training is going to focus on not necessarily hardcore training, but more psychosocial training, dealing with people's managing self and mind, communicating during a crisis, helping leaders who are also having a very hard time coping with this in terms of how they cope during a crisis. So we're dealing with those first types of training initiatives before we get on to dealing with hardcore training in terms of skills training, etc. That will come, but we figure in a pandemic like this, even though some people, like in certain hotels, etc., who have online training, staff have already gone on and been involved in, you know, American Hotel and Lodging Association, or if Marriott's also branded hotels have their own training, some staffs have gone on, but there are other people who may or may not have received like NIS checks as yet, that are really nervous about their survival, who have children, and of course children are being schooled at home as well. So that is also another area of anxiety, I guess, and stress. So we're going to start with online first. I can't remember. Could you give me the other parts of the question, please?
No, but the other parts of the question go into the informal sector. Maybe just to complement what you were saying, Dr. Hall, just to also share with participants that from the ILO Office for the Caribbean, we are also exploring and in discussions with Barbados on supporting those initiatives of how to complement access to, financial support with people who have lost their jobs, who are in a way idle at home, and complement it with some necessary training around OSH, around personal soft skills, as a way of helping increase their employability, keeping them kind of active. You were mentioning the psychosocial. I think we can never underestimate the impact that will have later on. So in terms of the second half of the question, that I think actually can go to all panelists, it's what is the impact on the informal economy, and how to deal with the lack of coverage or access to government grants. Some of you have already touched upon that. In some countries, there have been that extra step trying to provide some kind of assistance to those workers. But if you could develop a little more, that'd be very welcome. Thanks.
Right. Me?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Informal sector. In this facility that the loan and grant facility that the government, the stimulus package, the informal sector, in a part where one of the packages is for the vulnerable. And when I was studying that, the informal sector, but particularly they were speaking to like hair braiders, beach vendors, the guys who put out chairs on the beach, the types of sectors that definitely any businesses come to a screeching halt. Facility is made within that $250 million facility for members of the informal sector. With respect to training, they will also be included, because what we are doing, we're taking oh God, my brain is leaving me. But we have all the categories within the sector, and we are definitely creating modules for each category, and we will be training, because those frontline people, the informal sector, are the frontline gladiators for the tourism industry. They're the ones who directly connect with the guests, and they are the ones who are, in terms of from zero, for receiving training and assistance to make sure they're trained up and retooled when the industry recovered. But also what I've seen from the government stimulus, there was some provision made in there for several categories of the informal sector.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hall. Maybe let me ask you, it's not a follow-up question, but since it also kind of ties in what we heard in last week's session with micro and small entrepreneurs, and the idea of fostering and promoting more local and regional tourism. And this ties with a question also that we've received, which is there a plan for a phased reintroduction of tourism? So while borders remain closed, so in case of Barbados, thanks.
Yes, well, what we're seeing, I mean, this coronavirus almost seems to have a mind of its own. Just when we think we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel and we start to let down our guard a little bit, it comes back with a bang. You see that in a lot of countries around the world, maybe America or even Europe. There's certain countries who were doing very well and thought they had contained the virus, like China, or it's South Korea, even Germany, and they reopened and there was a resurgence. And then people are fearing a second wave, so they immediately locked back down. Now, we don't want that to happen in Barbados. And what is happening around the world is that they're starting very slowly with localized tourism, domestic tourism, regional tourism, and then most destinations around the world still have their borders closed to international visitors. Like, for instance, the EU will close its external border, but its internal borders, it would allow EU members or residents to travel. But what is happening with Barbados, we cannot afford, the thing about this virus is life versus livelihoods. And this is like death by firing squad or death by hanging. It is the most horrible choice we have to make, but of course we choose lives. The thing with what is happening, there's this model that is developing, it's called a travel bubble. travel corridor, where you find countries who've done a good job in containing or even eliminating the virus would actually, and are in close proximity, are actually deciding they're going to open up their borders to another country. So before Germany went back on there, it was like Germany, Austria, New Zealand, and Australia. I saw one with Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia. So it could be a triple, but that may be the way we will have to start out. We could start with local staycations. I believe it has to be localized first. When we reopen to the region, I don't think we could just open up to everybody. We may have to take a phased approach by using this travel bubble model. And that may be the way to go. But we have to open up at some point, but we can't do it if we're going to risk lives. So yes, very slow, very cautious, very phased.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hall. A question that I think I will, not to single her out, but I think Davinia, maybe you can touch upon. You talked about expats, but there's a question here about migrant workers in terms of how, let me quickly look at the exact wording. What support is being provided to migrant workers working in the MSMEs, and whether the panelists think enough is being done to integrate migrant workers as part of the formal sectors?
Okay, so you gave me the hardest question.
Well, you can answer parts, and we can get inputs from others.
Well, one thing I try not to do is to overreach. I can tell you that the SPDC has not done extensive research in terms of how many of the companies actually have migrant workers, whether they're expats, meaning whether they're formal migrant workers versus informal migrant workers. But that said, I think that the challenge for us is more so a policy matter. And the more the MSMEs create an avenue where there's a discussion, whether it's through our agency or, like I mentioned several times, the chamber, we're able to come up with solutions. That one of the things you asked is whether we feel as there's enough being done. So by the fact that we do not know baseline, that means no, there's not enough being done. But also too, though, different Caribbean countries integrate immigrants differently into their day-to-day work. So the Bahamas still has a lot to be said for the development of our agricultural sector, for example, where I know that there are a number of informal migrant workers in that environment, vis-a-vis some of our other sectors like tourism and finance. So I think baseline for us is to know better where we are, what baseline is, and then we can develop policy on the other end. I'm actually interested in hearing from the other countries to see how they've handled it. So at least we could begin to use that as a springboard for where we go here in the Bahamas.
Thank you very much, Davinia. If I don't see anyone else, I would say also, once again, to say that on the ILO COVID-19 and the world of work, we have measures that are being recorded in terms from all governments. And there are some where there's this question of migrants that are being looked at. We have time for maybe one more question, and this one, the participant has actually already designated 2 people to respond. That would be either you, Vic, or you, Davinia. And it says, can you provide any details on how to approve loans quickly in terms of process? Any suggestions, any from where you sit?
I can come in from here. I mentioned the example of Switzerland. What we've found is that countries that have got complicated forms to fill in are the ones that are lagging behind. It's a simple form. We need to move away from trying to be too particular about trying to establish the credentials of the companies. We need to err in favor of these smaller enterprises. And then there has to be a dedicated team or an office that can have a quick turnaround time of 24 to 48 hours. That's when you get serious about assisting the small businesses. Those are the countries that are successful. Those that take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks to get back to the applicants, it's too late, and they become despondent. So it's a simple form. It has to be a dedicated office within government. It has to have the finance available and the systems and bank accounts to move the money. The biggest challenge we've got in the developing world is cash transfers. Countries are not able to do cash transfers, and so it has to be into bank accounts, and that's where the informal sector is a huge challenge. We're looking at radio and mobile phones in the place of internet for the informal sector to communicate with them, because they just don't have the access to these computers and laptops and stuff that we're talking about now. So the informal sector is a different way and a more difficult one to deal with. Thanks.
I think Switzerland is definitely dispersing a lot faster than we are, while I do believe that we're dispersing quite quickly compared to our regular programs. I would say automatically we've dispensed with the need for the financial analysis. So the business plans and all that sort of stuff is becoming relevant in this instance because it's an emergency, but we've not dispensed with the KYC. And truthfully, there is some latency in the disbursement because of that particular requirement, but we find that it's at least helping sensitize individuals for the need for the formality. But for us, the use of the online portal sped up the process a lot as well. So clients actually have very little to fill in terms of an application per se, but more so what they're doing is uploading the documents directly to the portal. So, you know, their business registration copy, something to show, you know, the employees and what they're currently paying the employees, those types of documents are uploaded through the portal. And we have a decentralized approval process among the financial institutions that are partnering with us. So when we first started, the government, in order to make sure there was ease of flow, as you mentioned, of the funding, the government would have sent us the funding up front, and automatically, once we signed on the partners, we were able to disperse the money to them. So they had the money early, they had the criteria, all of the things that we're looking for. And so we have a relationship with them to quickly go ahead and do the KYC screening for the applications. And all of them are then able to easily do the wire transfers to the various accounts for the disbursements. But I do think that we could reduce the time, and reducing the time takes some level of scrutiny on the documents that we're requiring. So as early as an hour before this meeting started, the network of financial institutions were now discussing what can we do, what policy recommendation we can make to the board of the SPDC and to the government to reduce the time between when someone applies and when they've completed the application in terms of the KYC requirements.
Thank you very much. Last question, and this question goes to Mr. Mohammed, and it's about what's the employee response been to the work adjustments that you've been having to put in place?
The response, in fact, has been excellent. Prior to all of the restrictions, we would have met with staff at least 4 times as a group, and then in smaller departmental meetings. And we would have gone through expectations on their end, what may happen, what may not happen. So the response has been excellent. I think a very small handful of people might be a little resistant from the point of view of wearing masks, but other than that, our staff has been very cooperative. Some work on one day, some days, some work on other days. They are open to other suggestions. They have been very understanding and cooperating.
Thank you very much. We are in the last minute. So I actually had asked our panelists to kind of come up with one recommendation they would want to put forward either to the government or to enterprises, or in terms of this new era that we're facing. From my side, I just wanted to kind of say that listening to all of you, for me, I've heard a lot of in sense of redeployment, refocusing, reskilling, reimagining. And I think that shows that in a way it is, as Mr. Mohammed was saying, you know, stick to your bread and your butter, but at the same time, you know, you need to be creative, keep always on your toes, keep agile, keep informed. I think there was one moment where we talked about knowing about X, and I think as a region, that also resonates in terms of how we record, how we keep monitoring, how we keep tracking what is happening. And that is something that as a region, as we know, you know, data is often not available. It's hard, and it's maybe a time for us to, you know, rethink about how to collect that data. So with that having been said, can I ask my panelists to give in 15 seconds, every time I'm giving it even harder, just maybe one final recommendation. May I start actually the other way that we started, with Vic starting off, please. I believe your microphone is muted, Vic.
Sorry, that's half my 15 seconds already gone. There's my slide. Hit COVID-19 for a 6. What we need leadership, and we need a vision. That is going to be important. Everybody knows the facts and the drama that we're facing. The humanitarian crisis, the financial crisis. Now's the time for leadership and vision to plan for reactivation and recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Vic. May I ask Dr. Hall?
Yes, I have to give one to my Caribbean people, a complete shout out. I do believe that the Caribbean has some of the most creative, talented, resilient and resourceful people in the world. We have overcome hardships in the past, and we will survive and overcome this as well. And in every crisis, it is the businesses or the individuals that have the capacity to adapt quickly to the new environment, and they're the ones that thrive and are successful. And we have to keep that in mind. We have to adapt to this, what I hate the term as well as new normal. I think this is how it's going to be for the foreseeable future, where we're going to be at the mercy of exogenous shocks, and we have to be prepared. And I also think collaboration, the key word here, I agree, is vision and etc. But I think collaboration, more so than ever before, we are in this together, and we have to have a collective response, a collective regional response in the face of this invisible enemy we're fighting, and then definitely beyond. That's my contribution.
Thank you, Carey. Lavinia.
My number one cry would really be to the financial sector. Investments, especially for startups, tend to be very risk averse. The same way many governments have sort of thrown risk to the wind and created packages, you know, just to stimulate, just to help companies and employees get through this period of time. I believe investors need to pivot. Investors need to bring whether it's debt finance or equity finance to the table for startups in particular, because it's the startups where you're going to have the innovation for the solutions. That we will never see pre-COVID environments. That and you talked about it earlier about what's the new normal and all the rest of it. Life will evolve, but at a different pace with different specs and different parameters. And the only thing that will allow MSMEs to survive is their ability to innovate, to innovate and re-innovate, whether it's processes, whether it's tools, whether it's products and services, and access to capital. If we thought there was an MSME challenge before with access to capital, we need to encourage the investment community to not become more risk averse because of the crisis, but to reverse that and to jump in and help us with this re-engineering of our economy.
Thank you very much. Isab, last words.
Hi, thank you. So I'm going to ask the retailers to be very wary as we reopen borders. Things are going to change. Risk factors are going to change. Probabilities are going to change.
I believe we have lost Mr. Mohammed as he was giving his final words. I think it's 12:34, so we are 4 minutes over time. It's a shame that he got cut off at the very end, but I wish to, I think with this we will close the session today. I want to thank with all my heart to my participants who have stepped in sometimes on short notice. I also want to recognize and thank our team of the ILO for their work in the background. I wish to thank you all for participating. Know that the recording will be available. We will also be producing a short report on this session. And also just one last reminder, in 2 weeks' time, we will have another round of virtual table. On this occasion, it will be on labor market policies, employment protection legislation, and unemployment benefits. We look forward to seeing you there. And thank you very much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much.